Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown. And of course, the big news today is that Virginia Giuffre has taken her own life out in Australia. And all over X and every place else on the internet, we see people already saying, oh my God, they took her out. That she didn't take her own life, that she was murdered in order to keep her from talking. Well, she's talked an awful lot in the past. I mean, she's talked and talked and talked and talked, and she brought down Epstein and Maxwell. So I think if anybody wanted to get rid of her, I think they waited a heck of a long time to a point in time where it really probably doesn't matter anymore if you did something to her. So I really wish this kind of nonsense would stop. And I'm not talking about, people that have, let's say, 3 followers on X or on Instagram or on any one of the platforms. It's not a TikTok video somebody put out who's only got 20 followers. I'm talking about people with 1 million followers, people who have some level of credibility out in the world. Usually people who are heavily into politics. But the best way to just completely ruin your credibility, and also if you're on a particular, let's say, political bent associated with political party of one or the other, and I've seen this on both sides of the aisle, where ridiculous claims are being made by people who have credibility based on no evidence and nonsensically. Now, there are conspiracies out there. There are things that are questionable. I'm not saying they don't exist. As a matter of fact, I did this video on Jeffrey Epstein and John McAfee. What happened with these two? Which one were both of their deaths suspicious, or was one suspicious and the other not? And I'll tell you my conclusions. You can go up. The link is below. You can go listen to all my reasoning on both. Epstein, suspicious. I can't absolutely say what happened to him, but there were issues in that case, concerning issues, which could make his death suspicious, and there would be reason for somebody to want to off Epstein, because he did have a lot more to say, probably, if he wanted to. Now, McAfee, I did not find suspicious. And there were tons of people who went on and say that, oh my gosh, look, they murdered McAfee. No, there was no evidence that McAfee was murdered. And if you look at his history and his personality and so forth, you would realize, there's no evidence, and there's good reason to believe he probably took himself out. And a lot of people ask me, oh, can you do Marilyn Monroe? No, she clearly took she overdosed herself. There was no good reason. Yes, I know she was hooked up with the president, President Kennedy, but there was no really good reason to take her out. So that is, you have to look at motive in these things. So right now, first of all, the one thing we don't know about Virginia at the moment is exactly what her cause of death is. Now, a lot of people have said, oh, her cause of death was suicide. It's out there. That's a manner of death, folks. Whoever's writing your bad articles, that's a manner of death. That's not a cause of death. I don't know whether it was an overdose, whether it was a hanging, whether it was by a weapon. For women, it's usually an overdose or hanging. Hanging is actually quite popular because it's just easy to do, and almost always that is not a homicide. Very rarely is if you find somebody in that condition, is it a homicide? Very, very rare. Same is true for drug overdoses. Most of the time, that is a person who's decided to take their own life. Now, the police haven't come out and said anything yet, so I don't exactly know the actual details yet. So I am jumping the gun a little bit, but I wanted to just stop this disease all over the internet about Oh my God, they've killed it. And I want to say one other thing before I go on a little bit more about why I think that she had good, probably most likely took her own life, and about Epstein. The other big thing that goes on about Epstein and Maxwell is that they're pedophiles, and people do not understand what a pedophile is. A pedophile is someone who is interested in young children, young children. They haven't matured yet. They haven't gone through puberty. They're 6 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old, 2 years old, whatever. Epstein and Maxwell were not that. Well, I don't know what the heck Maxwell was besides helper to Epstein for procuring young women. What he liked was what you call barely legal. In other words, he's an ephebophile. An ephebophile is a person who likes teens, essentially, because they are women. They're grown women. They're just not officially adult women, but they're not little children. And what they like is fresh young women, and sometimes fresh young men, because they have the body of an adult, but in good shape, shall we say. And also naive and kind of giggly, that kind of whatever a teen is like, as opposed to somebody's 30 years old, 35 years old. So we see a lot of ephebophiles out there, not pedophiles, especially in the music business and acting and politics. They like a girl who becomes available to them. They often lure that girl, usually a girl coming from a very rough life, and often a runaway, and they're not actually kidnapping them. That's another fallacy. They're not usually being kidnapped. Kidnapped girls usually end up being kidnapped by serial killers, and they're not going to usually be alive. But the girls who end up in a situation like this are usually lured into it because they've already had issues in their life, often sex abuse, which she already had a horrible childhood and already run away and already been involved in things which, were rough. And when somebody comes and lures her, say, hey, you can get on fancy planes. I mean, you already done the stuff, you know what I mean? So, but we're going to give you the life you want. It's prostitution, essentially. And if you've had a crappy life and you think, wow, this beats that, hey, and you go along with the program. Does it mean that every time you have sex with somebody that you're set up with, that you're thrilled? No, but it's also not necessarily totally unpleasant either. It's just that's something you do. You drink a little bit, you go with the guy, you have sex, and you know what it is, it's prostitution. But the rewards, you think, and maybe at the time, are pretty cool. The lifestyle and the clothing, the gifts, whatever you're getting. Does that make the people who lured somebody into that life, does that say that's okay then, because the young person might have had some good times, they treated them well? No, they're still exactly what they are. They have no right to have sex with an underage person, and they have no right to lure people into that lifestyle and act as a pimp, passing that person around to their friends. So Epstein and Maxwell deserved what they got. Perhaps Maxwell deserves more than what she's getting. But anyway, but this is what she was lured into this life. So when we're looking at motive, she had a crappy childhood. She got lured into a life of prostitution. She was then managed. And I say managed, a lot of times, sometimes when girls get into prostitution, they get beaten, and they live a very dangerous, horrible life. And they can, at that point, be essentially locked up in certain circumstances where they are really trafficked in a horrifying way. But a lot of times there's not necessarily physical violence, but there can be, theoretically, you can have threats of certain sorts, like, well, if you leave, you're not going to make it in the world. or, you know, what kind of job could you get? You know, what if your name goes out there that this is what you've been doing? You know, those kind of things. I don't know that she was threatened with, you know, death or that kind of thing if she decided to leave, because eventually she did leave. She's, you know, not, she did leave, and she got married, and she went off to Australia with her husband and had kids. And then she came out and spoke up against Epstein and Maxwell, which is extraordinarily brave to do that, and nobody killed her. So I just want to read a little teeny bit from Wikipedia just right before her death. On March 31st, 2025, she claimed that her car collided with a bus traveling at 70 miles an hour, resulting in her going into renal failure. She put out a post on Instagram. She said she had been given 4 days to live. The Western Australia police later announced that they had records of a, quote, minor crash between a bus and a car on March 24th, but that no injuries have been reported as a result. And there was this picture on, she had some looked like bruising on her face on Instagram. Her family later said in a statement that a police report had been filed following the accident, and Giuffre, who was banged up and bruised, was subsequently taken to the hospital as her condition deteriorated. So, don't know. At the same time, she was accused of breaching a family violence restraining order taken out by her estranged husband, with a court hearing set for April 9th. She later denied violating any such order and added that she would defend herself against the malicious claim. And then her family did say that she died by suicide in her home. And she did say this one back in 2019. She had a tweet that resurfaced upon her death where she stated that she, in quote, in no way, shape, or form was suicidal in case something happened to her due to the Epstein accusations. So people are going way back to 2019 to say, see. Well, I understand why she said that in 2019, because clearly that's an issue, that when you're speaking up against so powerful a person, you think maybe they'll come after me. But she did, and they didn't. And he's dead, and Maxwell's in prison. So that has nothing to do with 2025. What has to do with 2025 is all the baggage of her life, midlife crisis, failure of her marriage, some real bad issues between she and her husband, and I don't know what the kids, I don't know what's going on there. That can put the person into severe depression where they just say, I just don't see a future that I want to live. So right at this point in time, I don't see any evidence that she didn't take her own life, that there was any reason for anybody to kill her. I mean, if you're going to actually say somebody did her in, it'd be more likely her estranged husband than it would be anybody that has to do with Epstein. So just to be realistic about it, stop all the nonsense out there that immediately runs out and says, all these people all over the internet immediately saying, oh, they did her in, she was murdered. And you have 1 million followers. And then you stir up all of these people who will believe just about anything because they want to believe those kind of things. I get very frustrated with that because it's different with somebody who only has 20 followers. It's like, okay, who is that person? You know, that those people can say anything they want because, you know, half the time their real name isn't even, you know, on you know, X or on wherever they're throwing their stuff up. Their real name isn't even there. So you can ignore all that nonsense because that's just everywhere. But when you have people who have major followings, stop it. Please just stop it, because you've got no evidence and you apparently do not understand how things work. So maybe you should shut up and not go there, because I think you're just stirring up a whole lot of trouble, and it's quite despicable in my opinion. So anyway, those are my thoughts. If you're new to the channel, please do like and subscribe, and check out my link below for the Epstein and McAfee video if you want to understand more why I have at least some suspicions on Epstein, but no suspicions on McAfee. Thank you for being here. See you next time. Bye.